Thank you to my channel members and Ko-fi supporters that make these videos possible. You can also support me by buying a deck tech on my weekly Tuesday and Sunday streams. More info in the video description. Hello everyone! Clement the Worrywart has always been an interesting commander to me since his release in Bloomburrow late last year. Not only because frogs are my favorite animal, but because of all the silly bouncing shenanigans you can do with him alongside iconic cards like Manowar that have been power crept over time, but gain a new context here. Naturally, with the commander caring about self-bounce so much, I looked for all sorts of effects that could be fun to repeat. Sounds like normal deck building, right? Well, I'm lying, even about the frog thing. My favorite animals are actually snails, octopuses, and other various mollusks. It's crazy to me that those things are related. Anyway, this isn't a taxonomy video. What I'm trying to say here is I'm not sure if this common path of find a commander and build around it is actually the correct way of creating a fulfilling commander deck most of the time. Of course, I say most of the time because there's an exception to every rule. If there's a legendary creature that you find interesting, of course, build around it until you can't anymore. And if you're doing a strategy like Voltron, of course your deck will be built around your commander to a degree. The point I'm trying to make here is that starting deck building not with the commander and letting the cards you want to play with dictate who's going to be in the command zone and not the other way around has been a method that has not only produced fun decks for me, but versatile and resilient ones as well. The deck in this video is the perfect example of this way of going about deck building that I feel more people would benefit knowing about. Let's devolve my Clement deck to its original form so we can see how it got built up to what it is now. We go from a cute frog to dear God, Emrakul? Yes, I've always wanted to build around Emrakul, the Promised End. Her ability to gain control of a player was always interesting to me. And while her effect is present on a few black sorceries, and the progenitor of this style of card, Mindslaver, I personally adored and admire Emrakul the most overall, due to her flavor and the many hoops she provides. How do you get around the extra turn she so graciously provides her chosen? This being said, when I tried Emrakul in the command zone, she was not well supported. At least, she was not supported in the way that I wished. It's a shame, since she performs well with Sanctum of Eternity, but having to rely on Erratic Portal and Artifact so heavily in a colorless deck made me ponder why I wasn't just using Mindslaver. I knew then, even if it was at the cost of using Sanctum of Eternity, I had to find a better home for her. Besides, Emrakul always preferred to be subtle in her approach. With Emrakul out of my head, sorry, I mean the command zone, I started compiling a list of cards I knew I could not play this deck without. Gerard's Hourglass Pennant to skip the extra turns that opponents would get after I so politely take their turns for them, as well as Urza's Saga and Trinket Mage to get it with. Traverse the Uvenwald to synergize with the Delirium discount that Emrakul gets, and to actually find Emrakul, in addition to other tutors, Fierce Empath and Conduit of Ruin. I also wanted to see if I could fit the other legal Emrakul into this list and support her. I figured why not try, since discard outlets can help me get Delirium for the play and AME, so they synergize well enough. That does involve getting colorless as basically a third color in the deck though, which is fine, since part of the deck's game plan as established is finding Urza's Saga, so Crop Rotation, Sylvan Scrying, Urza's Cave, and Nylea's Intervention are all already find additions. It's just now they can be used to tutor for colorless sources such as the Urza's Land / Planar Nexus combo. It was at this point I recognized an easy way to support the 12-mana Emrakul, in the form of Cephalid Coliseum and Gaia Reach Sanitarium alongside these land tutors. These were also really funny with the Promised End, as if I activated them on my opponent's turn, I could control them and make them discard the worst possible cards. Speaking of 13-mana Emrakul, now is the time I decided to add Satyr Wayfinder, Rampant Froggantua, and Malevolent Rumble to help mill. Now then, we have this Simic pile of non-negotiable cards. What commander supports our game plan well? I thought at first to use Slogurk the Overslime because of all the self-mill and land sacrifice that's going on with this pile. And while I don't think he'd be bad in any regard, I was growing wary of having to run Crystal Shard and Erratic Portal in the list to bounce my Emrakul repeatedly. For a moment, I was also considering Troyan, who not only was a discard outlet for Delirium and 12-mana Emrakul, but was also just an incredible dork for casting those big mana plays. I knew deep down that Kulain was the best option, but I desperately did not want it to be true. So I put Troyan in the command zone for now, and kept working on the 99. It was now that I started looking at diversifying my types to enable Delirium. Kozilek's command for being a busted card with big colorless mana and also being Kindred. Oko and Narset also joined the deck. Narset not only because of her Planeswalker typing, but also due to her synergy with Cephalid Colosseum and Gaia Reach Sanitarium, which I originally added to support 12 mana Emrakul, but now, with Narset, they had a new context of forcing opponents into a state of attrition from my mana base. With my large amounts of instants and activated abilities on lands, I opted to try out Wilderness Reclamation as an enchantment. It was also at this time that I got the idea to use Dress Down to not only help stifle opposing plays and cantrip and put an enchantment in the yard, but also stifle my own Emrakul the World Anew Leaves trigger. In fact, in a state where I've already nabbed someone's board with the 12 mana Emrakul, I could muddle the mixture for the Dress Down to ensure that I keep that board. Some people might be puzzled by the 1 Kindred card and the 2 Planeswalkers. I think it's important not to get lost in the sauce here. Having 5 types is already enough to start comboing with Emrakul. 6 or 7 is totally fine as well. I'm not looking to compromise my list with subpar cards just to get that extra point or 2 of Delirium. The ceiling is just not worth the floor. I finally decided to ditch Crystal Shard for Dowerport Mage, since he could at least be tutored for by Traverse the Uvenwald. With the Frog Bounce theme from Dowerport Mage's home set of Bloomburrow, I finally decided to take another look at Clement as a possible commander. I originally sort of glazed over him because I thought, where am I going to get a large enough mana value creature to bounce Emrakul? Not taking another second to realize, no wait, Aether Channeler and Mana War were perfectly fine early game plays that could also loop with Emrakul and the commander later. I was so relieved. I could finally cut the lackluster portals while simultaneously avoiding the culling vibe tax. I really think this is the most important change in the deck to analyze. Trying to find cards that are good in all situations. What I like about Mana War and the Channeler is that they can be used on opposing creatures as easily as allied ones. And while the portals are the same way, they do so with inconsistency and are far more expensive up front. And cards like Quickling, which I literally got Frame 1 recommended in the comments of the deck, are too narrow, with the floor being abysmal, and the ceiling only being good when I'm already comboing off. It is possible that I end up adding Shrieking Drake, but this is because it's really best in show when it comes to this effect, and has some silly play even outside of the combo. Though, props to Quickling, of course, that it can get got off Muddle. Playtesting the deck, I was struggling with consistency, mostly just card flow. This is when I remembered an old commander card, Amanatu's Augury, which worked well with this Delirium shell, and also a recent card that made a splash in Modern with a similar play pattern, Portent of Calamity. With these 2 cards that cared about free casting off the top, I decided to add in Brainstorm and Brain Surge to help dig, both of which effects were already good with all the shuffle effects the deck ran, even if neither of the free cast sorceries were drawn. A pull from Tomorrow to go with the Metal of the Mixture was also decided upon for this time, as well as Null Drifter that had synergy with the existing Sanctum of Ugin. I also added another Delirium-friendly card, Occult Epiphany, whose power I learned about from playing with and against it some in LSV's Vintage Cube, which was the premier cube in the tournament I won. Concerned about survivability, I went ahead and added Evacuation and Perplexing Tests as sweepers, both of which could also be used to return my stupid cast trigger creatures to my hand, which is actually upside. While I've not settled on it yet, I've considered Devastation Tide as well, which of course goes well with the Brainstorms in the list. At the end of it all, this deck can consistently use both Emrakuls, especially the Promised End, by assembling the Hourglass Pennant, the Commander, and Mana War to infinitely control the table. Even before then, Emrakul's a perfectly serviceable tempo play, even to make when she doesn't go infinite like this. Okay, that's a lot, but you can see how the deck here evolved. Starting with the non-negotiable cards I wanted to play with, then finding overlaps that linked those pet cards together, and then filling the gaps with independently good cards that still have synergy with draws in the list. Only towards the end of that chain did I figure out what the commander was in this ordeal. I still feel like the deck might be a little bit light on an alternative path to victory if both of the big Emrakuls are dealt with, but I'm trying out Demolisher Spawn as a backup plan, and I've already had a good time comboing that overrun with Occult Epiphany. This being said, it's pretty hard to interact with the lock, with the first part of it being on a cast trigger and the second half being on a flash artifact I can cast on your mind-controlled turn. Let me know down in the comments below if you've tried building a deck from the bottom up like this. How did it go? What about the other way? Was there a commander you built around and the deck fell flat because you started with the command zone? Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye! Sorry, I'm kinda sick. Tee. Rampant Fragrantua could also serve as Rampant Fragrantua.